Hi, so this demonstration video for B04 Introduction to Python, this video will cover using inbuilt functions in Python and then creating our own functions in Python. So we're looking at worksheet 2, and if we look at worksheet 2, we can do something like define a basic variable such as bar1, and that can contain our name, maybe our name is Jane, and we looked at before how you can use the print function to get the length of that variable 1. So we can run this by clicking on the green arrow here, and we can run this code, and we see here it is printed out the length of the name Jane, and it says process finished with exit code 0, which means that everything worked okay. So 0 is Python's way of getting across that it found no errors. Sometimes you might see it give this red circle here, it just refers to the spacing, but that doesn't really matter. So if we change the name Jane to a sequence, we can also run that as well and find out how many letters are there too. We can improve that, and I'm just taking code from the worksheet that say we want to read in user input. We can do that in the same way as well. And what this is doing, if we just modify the code marks, is this is taking in the input, and this is a function that reads in information from the user. So what we can do is maybe assign this. If we just maybe run through this demonstration first of all, what we'll do is we'll call this an int. So we'll move this line is not necessary, and this will just take it in, but it won't do anything. So it'll just ask us down here, enter a number. I'm going to enter the number 4, and it will finish because we didn't ask to print it out. So what we can do is maybe assign that as a variable and then print num1 out. And let's say we can say our number is num1 with a comma before num1. So if we run this, we're taking the input from the user, assigning that as an integer, putting that into the variable num1, and then we're printing out, just say our number is whatever. Enter a number, there we go, and it prints that out. Okay, so that's a more advanced version. We can do modifications to num1. So for instance, I can get them, use the modulus function to get the remainder when it's divided by 3 as many times as possible. So that if say this is the number of DNA letters in a sequence, we can get the remainder left over. If say it was we're trying to convert it to amino acid sequence. So there we see the remainder is 1. If we divide 34 by 3 as many times as we can, we get 1 left over. And a more advanced version, as per the example, is to maybe we can get the length of num1 and put this inside the function as well. So we can there enter a DNA sequence here, and we're assigning that to num1 again. So there we can type in our DNA sequence there. Oh, my mistake was that it was assigned as an integer. We don't want that. So we can retry this, rerun it there. Now we're dealing with a number. If I can type into my screen, there we go. So we had 13 letters in our DNA sequence that we read in. So you can see that we can do modifications to user input. There's different things we can do there. We can read it in as a list as well. So num1 is now a list. And then we can look at the different things inside num1. So I'm print it out at the end as well as getting the length. So now we'll just type in a different DNA sequence. You can see there that we have the list function to create an array-like object out of our sequence. So what we can do is make a function out of this if we want. So what we need to do here is define a function. So we're going to call def, which defines a function I'm going to call myfun1, just as a random name to define the function. And then what I would need to do is put in round quotes at the end and a a colon to indicate that it's a function. And you see that the line automatically indents at the start here to find that we're going to create code actually using this similar to this here. So we might take in something here, but we don't need to do yet. We might print out this already. So let's start with a simple one. We're getting the length of this sequence. So let's call it num1 is equal to a sequence. I'm assigning it as that string. And what we can do, let's just remove this, is call my fun one. So what we want to do when we call it is simply type in the function. So if we run this, we're expecting it to print out this particular sequence, including the number there. So it says number, it's 11 bases long, and then it prints that out at the end. We can make this more advanced. So we could have input from the user that we define as our sequence. So I'm going to call it seq1. This is input, enter sequence here. Then we have sequence. We're going to send seq1 to our function. So our function will take in seq1, and what we might do is then remove this sequence because we don't need it, and just say our number is length of seq1, and then we want to print it as well, and we're going to call it down here. So let's try this. So we're going to enter in the sequence. Doesn't matter if it's lowercase or uppercase, and it says that there's an error. So it's when missing one positional argument in seq1. So what we want to do here is consider how our function is working together. So when we call our function here, in the round brackets here, we can give it an argument that is passed to the function. So if we call our function here, we're not giving it anything to it in there. We have to find seq1 above, but we need to send seq1 into our function. So we need to put in seq1 here because that's our variable that we have there. We can even move this up here and call it here. And now what we need to do is that we need to acknowledge we don't actually need to call these the same names. Indeed, it might be better to call this just name1 and use that consistently within the function to print the name and the actual sequence. And that's consistent within the function. So let's try running this. So we have our sequence here. Let's put into seq1. And here we see that my function is not defined yet. So let's define our function and then call the function afterwards. So we add in our sequence as before. And then we see I left out seq1 instead of seq. And needs to be the right variable name. And there we see that our length is printed out 13. And then we have our bases printed out. There's more advanced versions that we can use to develop this, and this is to return it. So instead we won't want to print it, but we can also return name1. So what this is doing here is that when we call my phone one, we're sending the seq1 bases here to be effectively take the place of name1. That's our DNA bases we read in. Name1 are those DNA bases that we can print out if we want. And then we can return it, which sends it back to this function. So we could even call this seq2 is equal to 2, and then we could print that out to say seq2 is the following seq2, even though seq1 and seq2 are the same. So let's run that. We have to put in our sequence here. We see that this is 8 bases long. It says seq2 is the same basis as we had for seq1. And we can just double check this by copying and pasting to say seq2 is the above first one on line 12 and seq1 is the one on line 13. And then we have the identical DNA sequences. So by calling my phone1, sending seq1 here goes up to name1, name1 is printed out there with our length. And then we return name1 back to the function, and we're assigning that to seek2, and then we can print out seek2. So we can pass information to a function and take information from a function as well. So that's a brief introduction to functions, our own functions, as well as inbuilt functions in Python.